What's going on, guys? Car livery. Guess what? My client's first car. And guess what she got it with? Car livery.
Got my license yesterday. I got my license yesterday and I got my car today. Thanks for car livery.
What's going on, y'all? This is Jamie Alexander for Gen Pop TV, and here are the top 5 stories of the month. Stay tuned.
Hey, yo, my fault on the last episode. I had the top 5 episodes, but I put the order counting down from 5 to 1. It was backwards. You heard? So this is 1 through 5 the way it's supposed to be. Yo, shout out to the bro Truth Parker. Make sure you go check that Truth Behind These Walls podcast on all your streaming platforms. Type in Truth Behind These Walls. You heard? Truth Parker, aka DJ For Show. If you ain't familiar with that DJ For Show catalog, put in St. Lad's DJ For Show and watch how many exclusives pop up. You heard? Pause. Get at me. Broadcasting live from New York City. It's the hottest channel on these YouTube streets. The best jail stories and hood stories are here. Make sure you subscribe today. LAZ.
So the doors pop open, right? And the skinhead guy, he walks into the cell and he's calling for dude to follow him. So the vice lord kid, he shoots in the joint, and immediately starts swinging. You could hear punches landing, sneakers screeching, things being knocked around the cell, all that. And in the midst of that, 3 other skinheads made their way in the cell before the door gets closed. Now 2 of them, they got combination locks and a sock tied around their hand. Alright, so let me get to my joint. Alright, so this is a little story about some of the prisons that's out in the southwestern region of Virginia. I'm talking about where VA borderlines Tennessee and West Virginia. So for those that don't know or unfamiliar, when it comes to the prison system out here in Virginia, they got 3 different regions and how they separate, classify, and house the inmate population. So the central region, which is where I am now, it's like the center line, directly through the middle of the state mostly. And it also includes like the northern parts and the southern parts of the state. And then you got the eastern region, which is where I just left a couple of years ago. That's all the prisons that's out there in 757 area, closer to the Virginia Beach and Norfolk, Chesapeake, Newport News, and Hampton Roads area. And then you got your western region. It's the southwestern region actually, which is the furthest region away, just from about every and anything that resembles any type of metropolitan city or urban area. Or at least for me it was, being as though I'm from Jersey and I was living in Richmond. So out there it's like mostly all rural area. It's spaced out land and huge mountains. We had to take like a 5-6 hour bus ride out there, shackled down, chained up, handcuffs to your waist and all of that. You're on a bus with 20, 30 other dudes headed out to that region where the prisons, where you probably ain't gonna get no visits and shit for a real long time, unless of course you actually from out there. But it's not a lot of black folks that live out there either, so you could already know what type of time the guards and the COs be on. It's definitely a different type of bed out there, for sure. Now what I mean when I say that is, for one, the western region, that's where the Supermax Red Onion State Prison is located. That's actually the furthest one out, but all the other max security joints is located around there too, except for Sussex 1 and Sussex 2, which both of those are in the eastern region. So with the exception of those 2, all the other maximum super high security prisons in VA is all out there in the west. So you got Red Onion, as I already mentioned, then you got the other supermax joint called Wildlands Ridge, which that one and Red Onion, they was both built right about the same time, one right after the other. And they supposed to be like state of the art and have like super high security measures. You know what I'm saying? Like no chance of escaping type of facility, real high tech shit. You know, and it's intended to really house the absolute worst of the worst prisoners and the dudes that's on long-term segregation. Now, the majority of the dudes out there, you know, they basically on a 23-and-1 type of schedule for the most part. You know, I think it might have changed a little bit now, but that's really where you would go when you can't be housed at none of these other high security spots. You know, due to either your initial crimes was just super heinous, or because you might be a danger to others, or possibly just fight all the time, or maybe you even stabbed or killed another inmate, or got into it with some correction officers at some point, probably got caught with a cell phone or some other serious infractions. Then you got a spot called Keene Mountain. That's where I started at. You know, and then you got a spot called Augusta, which both of those joints are fairly old. You know, they've been around for a while. They still real high security. You know, they house a whole lot of lifers and niggas that got crazy football numbers and all that. And then you got a spot called Pocahontas, which was, I think that was built in like either 07 or 08. You know, and that also holds a lot of lifers. I spent some time there too. And you got another spot out there called Marion. You know, that houses all the crazies, you know, and the dudes with serious mental issues, the real shit slingers, you know. And then the newest prison built out there is named River North. That's pretty much like Gang Central. You know, I mean, the gangs is heavy in all these joints for real, but the biggest difference in River North is that, you know, it's specifically built to house high-level security gang members. So along with other high security level prisoners, you know, that's pretty much what it is. You get what I'm saying? We call that spot Gangland, for real. Like, if you're not a real gangbanger, or you're not on go mode at all times and totally with the shit, you know what I'm saying? If you're not willing to push that blade for your set, you may as well not even be on that compound, you know, because that's all that's going on over there. Pure madness and chaos, 24/7. You know, it's like as soon as them doors pop open and niggas come out themselves, you already know it's some bullshit gonna jump off. You know, but in certain aspects, for real, that's pretty much how it is at all these high-level spots out here in the West. It's just a different atmosphere, you know, altogether. Now, speaking of atmosphere, though, let me kind of describe for y'all the way these joints are built so you can kind of get a better understanding and an image in your head of what I'm talking about, because they all kind of similar in construction for the most part. So like I said, you know, it's all mountains out there. So for starters, you know, the air quality is much different. You know, it tends to get hard to breathe sometimes out there because the prisons, they actually build at a higher altitude than when they on flat ground. So what I mean is, like, imagine yourself standing on a real high mountaintop. You know, what they did when they designed these joints was they basically cut the tops and the peaks off the mountain and then hollow it out on the inside. And then they built the prison right inside of that hollowed out area. You know, now I know that sounds crazy as hell, but that's exactly how it's built. You know, the prisons sit inside the mountain. So when you outside, you know, on the yard, or anywhere for that matter outside, all you can really see as far as scenery is concerned is either straight up in the air at the clouds or like uphill inside the mountain. You know, there might be a few small trees or bushes here and there scattered around. You might even see a family of black bears or deers or even some wild turkeys running around sometimes, climbing up the insides of the hills. And it's real common for real to see rocks and boulders sometimes tumbling down the sides. But that's it. You know, other than the usual razor and electric barbed wire fences and gates, you know, and watchtowers with the AR-15 rifles and shotgun-toting guards in them. You know, they be ready to shoot your ass too without no hesitation and second notice. But that's all you really get out there to look at in the mountains. You know, I actually did an episode on my podcast called Cell Blocks versus Dorms, where I talk about and describe the higher security level prisons out here and the major differences, you know, with the lower security joints. And I talked about a lot of the various security measures that be in place and what to expect, you know, if you was to ever get out there to one of those spots. So I might want to take a second, go check that out after you finish listening to this. But needless to say, you know, dudes be trying hard to get out that region, you know, and back to the east or the central regions, closer to where their families be at, and away from all that racism and bullshit that be going on out there. I said racism because, you know, besides all the regular bullshit that comes with just doing time and being far, far, far away from your family and way out there, you know, the racism out there is super blatant. You know, I mean, for one, like I said, blacks, we really outnumbered in everything from the inmate population to the administration out there. You know, it's a total and complete opposite of all the other regions, you know, where the majority is mostly all blacks than anything. Out in the West, that's flipped, you know, and it's way more white guys. And they ain't got no problem calling you a nigga or a boy and all that type of shit. You know what I mean? They be on the yard with their shirts off, you know, big swastikas on their chests and faces, thunderbolts on their necks and arms, you know, just really broadcasting that shit. And I mean, like, absolutely all the guards out there is white. You know, they got some of the same tattoos too, for real. And they keep them in common and visible areas, broadcasting their affiliations in plain view so you can see them. And, you know, even if you do happen to come across a black guard here and there, trust and believe, you know, he thinks and he acts like he's white. You know, he believes he got to show his ass for his co-workers and superiors to really take him seriously. So a lot of times, you know, they could wind up being worse than the racist white guards. And believe it or not, you know, a lot of them COs, they be related to each other out there. You know, the Western region, that shit is like a tight-knit group where like whole families could be spread out through the different facilities out there. So you might have like cousins and uncles and fathers, daughters, and sons. They might all have jobs in the Department of Corrections out in them joints. So, like I said, you know, it ain't many blacks that live in or around them small hillbilly towns. So in a lot of cases, you know, the prison might be the biggest employment opportunity available in those areas. It used to be mining, you know, but all that shit closed up and shut down years ago. So the best thing available for them folks that live in those areas now is the Department of Corrections and these wild-ass prisons. You know, they be out in the middle of nowhere, so you can only imagine what kind of people you're going to encounter. Now, as far as the inmate population goes, you know, you got all the white hate groups and gangs out there, too. You know, you got skinheads, you got the Aryan Nation and the Aryan Brotherhood, you got the Ku Klux Klan members, you know, you got all types of redneck groups like the Proud Boys. You even got the biker gangs out there, you know, like the Hells Angels and the Pagans and the Mongols. And then you got another group, you know, called the DWBs, which stands for Dirty White Boys. Now that's a group of dudes who, you know, for whatever reasons, they wasn't deemed good enough or accepted into those other white boy gangs and groups. So they just made up their own shit. You know, and believe it or not, like them white boy groups, they get it in. You know, and they get into it amongst themselves a whole lot more than they even be beefing with us, the blacks. You know what I'm saying? That shit is crazy, but it's true facts. And, you know, you still got your black gangs out there too. You know, like the Bloods and the Crips. They just not as many. You know, they not as deep and as plentiful as they are in these other regions and other prisons. But I do want to say, when I was out there, you know, the biggest black gang was probably the GDs, for real. And from what I could tell, you know, that was because a lot of those white boys was claiming to be GDs too. And a lot of the black guys, they kind of just accepted them in. And then too, you know, out here in VA, I don't know how it is in Chicago or other places because I don't bang, but out here, the GDs and the Crips, they get along with each other. You know, they like affiliates or some shit. So, you know, they piece each other up, twist their fingers together, all that shit. So, you know, that in itself kind of makes them larger in certain places out west too. But nonetheless, you know, they still outnumbered when it comes to them white boy hate groups. Now, what's wild too, and what was really shocking for me to see firsthand, was that the white boy gangs and groups, they hate those white boys with a passion. You know, the ones that try to be down with the blacks or talk with black slang or move with, you know, some kind of black swag with them or listen to rap or hip-hop music. Like, they hate them dudes more than they hate us. You know, and they flat out go to war with them without a care in the world, man, and spill blood with them like they was their real enemies. I remember this guy one time, white kid, man, kind of young, probably in his late 20s, early 30s or whatever. He had just come to the compound. Now, this was when I was at Pocahontas prison. I think he was from Roanoke or Danville area, somewhere out there. Anyway, the kid was new, you know, fresh off the street, right out of receiving. He ain't know what to expect from prison, you know, other than what I assume he probably seen on television and shit. But anyway, the kid, he immediately makes it known that he's a vice lord from whatever set. You know, now I'm not real familiar with them either because I haven't really ran across many of them before. You know, they most certainly ain't got no big numbers in the system out here. But just like the GDs, you know, that get along with the Crips, from what I could tell initially, this Vice Lord dude, he got along with the Bloods. Now, I only say that because, you know, he could immediately be seen piecing up all the Bloods that had been on the compound, you know, twisting his fingers up with him and all that. The problem was, you know, I think he was the only Vice Lord on this compound at the time. So, little do he know, you know, he don't really have no allies as far as other gang members. And that made him a mark, you know, or an enemy, so to speak, not of only the GDs and the Crips, which would have been his natural rivals, but all these other white boys too that really hate other white boys that think they black or run with the blacks. So he's totally oblivious, you know, and unaware, and has no clue what kind of shitstorm he done walked himself into. So anyway, a couple weeks into his bid, you know, he's butting heads with some of the skinheads and the ABs about, I don't know, little small shit, probably nothing major. As a matter of fact, his cell partner was a skinhead. And so, you know, he's cursing out and making little small threats and shit towards some of the older Ku Klux Klan members. And dang, hold on one second.
You have 1 minute remaining.
Yeah, I knew that was about to jump on. Let me call you right back.
All right.
Thank you for using GTL.
Yo.
Yo.
Yeah.
Alright, so he's cursing out, you know, getting into it, making little threats and shit to some of the Ku Klux Klan guys about little dumb shit. You know, most of them are usually older dudes anyway. But in other words, you know, he's clearly showing his ignorance as to how the prison politics really work out there in the West. You know, he's not minding his business and things like that too. Now, I don't really think dude was beefing with him on no racial shit or nothing. You know what I mean? I think it was more so just a younger kid that's new. You know, he's trying to figure out how all this prison shit works. You know what I mean? At the same time, he's trying to be noticed, you know, and make a name for himself, while also trying to be looked at or portray the role as someone who stands his ground, you know, and is down for whatever and with the shit, basically. Well, what he failed to realize, you know, was after those few weeks of doing all that, they really got tired of just tolerating his little threats and disrespectful mouth. You know, and probably, you know, overcasting of it all was just the fact that he claimed to be a part of a particular black gang, the Vice Lords, you know, but associated himself with all the Bloods on the compound. Who, frankly, you know, as far as I could tell, they didn't really care too much for him either. You know what I mean? Because they'd be laughing at him and joking him and talking shit about him, you know, taking advantage of him in their own little ways. And I guess he just wasn't able to see through the facade of that phony little friendship or that fake alliance that he thought in his mind probably would keep him protected from everybody else. You know, so he eventually did cross the line with his celly over some kind of debt, you know, that he owed to him and probably some of the others. And then for whatever reason, you know, he decided he wasn't going to pay it. Now, I guess he felt like, you know, fuck them skinhead dudes. I ain't paying them shit, that's dead. You know, and it's real possible, or it's a real possibility for that matter, that some of the Bloods was probably telling him the same thing. Like, you know, fuck them dudes. Don't pay them motherfuckers nothing. So anyhow, that's how he went about it. You know, and as it turns out, you know, him and his celly, they did get into it. You know, and they wound up having a little scuffle in the cell. And I guess dude, he must have got the best of him while they was in there, because, you know, when the doors popped open and he came out the cell, his chest was real poked out and he was talking shit, you know, telling everybody how he kicked the skinhead ass and all of that. And, you know, the skinhead dude, he did have a couple lumps on him, a black eye or whatever, nothing major, but you could tell he probably lost the fight. So, now the Vice Lord dude, you know, now he's feeling real good about himself. You know, he's talking big shit for the next day or so. He got him a little win under his belt. You know, he's able to make good on some of those threats and wolf tickets he was selling. So, you know, boom, the skinhead dude, him and his buddies, you know, they not taking the loss too lightly though. You know, and in their mind, dude still need to pay his debt. And on top of that, he need to be taught a lesson in prison politics out there. So they start plotting on him. Now, the way Pocahontas cell blocks was set up and operate is the cell doors, they controlled by the booth officer, okay? And the booth is like up in the air. So the officers are looking down on the pod. Now the doors, they open and close electronically, right? And they're supposed to open them like every few minutes and shut them. Well, they're supposed to open them for a few minutes and then shut them back every 30 minutes on the hour. You know, so they just don't stay open for you to go in and out whenever you please. You got to kind of wait for the door break and then, you know, do whatever you got to do or get whatever you're trying to get out your cell in that little window span that they open up, and then be back out the joint before the door closes. And if you're not moving fast enough, sometimes you could get locked in your cell or out your cell, you know, until the next door break. It definitely takes a little planning and some getting used to, though. But and then in between the door breaks, you know, there's an officer that's supposed to make rounds in the unit just to make sure, you know, ain't nobody in somebody else's cell that ain't supposed to be in there, or ain't nobody doing something they ain't supposed to be doing. Now the cells itself, you know, they're pretty nice size. I mean, considering the fact that it is a cell we talking about. But the way they set up, you know, it's a little bit of room in them joints. They're not real crowded and cramped compared to some of the other cells I've been in. I used to actually have full-blown workouts in my cell, you know, when my cellie was at work a lot of times, and there's plenty of room for that. I say that to say, you know, dudes a lot of times would invite somebody to their cell to settle their differences, you know, and they get it shaken in between the door breaks or whatever, so they could be away from the police view and not get into any trouble for fighting. You know, they could both step in the cell, get it rocking for a couple minutes, throw a few fists or whatever, then both walk out the cell as if nothing happened before the door shut back. Or, you know, I've seen times when the doors might shut on them and they get locked in the cell together. And then they'll be rumbling for like 30 minutes or more until the door opens back up and, you know, one of them comes back out. So that's what wound up happening to the Vice Lord kid. All right, one of the skinheads, he invited him to the cell to square up on the daddy old. And, you know, because he thought he was tough and for whatever reasons, I guess thought he was going to get a fair one. Or maybe he thought that the Bloods was going to hold him down. So he went in the cell with dude. You know, I guess he figured it was going to turn out like the last little fight he had with his cellie. Well, as it turns out, you know, it was far from that. So the doors pop open, right? And the skinhead guy, he walks into the cell and he's calling for dude to follow him. So the Vice Lord kid, he shoots in the joint, you know, and immediately starts swinging. You could hear punches landing, you know, sneakers screeching, things being knocked around the cell, all that. You know, and in the midst of that, 3 other skinheads made their way in the cell before the door gets closed. Now 2 of them, they got combination locks in the sock tied around their hands. And then the door winds up closing before the kid can make it out the cell. So now they all in the cell together. Now it just so happens, you know, that, I'm sure this was probably strategically planned by them, but it just so happens that on this particular day, the officer that was supposed to be making rounds in the unit, he just so happens to be one of those racist Aryan Nation CEOs that I spoke about earlier. And he don't like blacks at all, but he really hates the white boys that hang with the blacks. So this dude, he actually had a tattoo of a noose hanging from behind his ear with a black baby dangling from it down his neck. You know, and I guess his ear was supposed to represent a tree or something. I mean, that shit was wild. I ain't never seen no tattoo like that before. And then he had lightning bolts on the other side of his neck. So he's a full-fledged Aryan Brotherhood or whatever. Anyway, this is the dude making the rounds that day. So he's fully aware of what's going on in that skinhead cell. And they in there beating the shit out the kid. You know, it's 4 of them. They hitting the kid with the locks and the stock all over his body and head. You know, they punching on him, kicking on him, stomping him. They holding him down. They pinning his arms back. You know, they taking clean shots, taking turns, beating on him for like a whole 30-something minutes. You know what I mean? You could hear the kid yelling and screaming in pain from outside the cell in the day room. You know, when the door finally opened back up, he couldn't even really move, man. They beat the nigga so bad. I mean, they had to literally drag him out the cell. You know, he was a bloody mess, too. They wound up, like, knocking the kid's teeth out, you know, breaking bones in his face. They broke his eye socket. You know, the kid had wild lumps all over his head, you know, leaking from the top to the bottom. He must have lost his shirt somehow in all the action, because I seen his arms and legs and body was all black and blue and swollen from getting hit with that lock so many times. You know, I think they broke a few of his fingers and one of his arms, cracked some ribs. I mean, they really worked him over pretty good. You know, needless to say, that was the kid's first lesson in prison politics out west. You know, he piped down a lot after that beating. You know, as far as I know, he ain't never run up no more tabs with nobody else. And that was a lesson learned for him the hard way, you know. So the moral to the story, man, is basically just pay your debts, you know, and be aware of what's going on around you. You know, you can never underestimate nobody in this prison environment and how far they may be willing to go just to get even with you. You know, this shit ain't no game in here. And what might be small or meaningless to you could mean a whole lot to the next person. You know, and they might be willing to go all out to get it back from you in blood. You just never know. You know, dude should have known, though, he was a target, you know, by a lot of people. He was just being naive and blinded, I guess, by the notions of trying to be a tough guy, you know, and get some recognition for that without even, you know, fully understanding the consequences of his actions, you know, and how certain groups is just tied in better and plugged in more in certain places, you know, and they could be a lot more cunning and strategic in the ways that they move and get things done. You know, sometimes you just got to accept the fact that you're a small fish in a way bigger pond, and there's sharks all over that motherfucker just waiting for the right opportunity to bite your ass, you know what I'm saying? Anyway, lads, man, that's just one of the many stories I got from being out in the mountains. And like I said, that shit way different out there, you know, and anybody that been there can tell you that. You know, it's always love here on this side, though. You know, I appreciate you as always. Keep doing what you do. And shout out to my man, Day Brown. And he been out there in them mountains for a long time. You know, he probably won't ever get to hear this shit because he got an L note. You know, that nigga came in the system with 2 years to do in the early 80s and turned that shit to a double life sentence. You know, that's a whole nother story, though. Big shouts to my Muslim bro, Sadiq. You know, he about to touch down in a few months after 26 years in. My God body man's Justice, my homie Woogie, both 20-something years in, still counting. You know, I hope y'all know we still fighting for you out here. And my man Gucci, Catchmore, they fresh on the land after doing 20+. I mean, the list goes on and on, man. I can name niggas for days. You know, it's a lot of real brothers behind these gates. Shout out to all my day ones, you know, all the folks who held and continue to hold me down through this bid. You know, if you was down with me on the land and I ain't seen or heard from you in all this time I've been gone, do me a favor, man, and make sure you keep that same energy with you when I touch down. You already know what it is. And for the listeners, you know, y'all can also come check me on my podcast, Truth Beyond These Walls. It's on Spotify, Apple, Audible, iHeartRadio, wherever. You know, just search for it. You can also holler at me directly on my Instagram at Truth Beyond These Walls. You know, it's just a short beginning of a real long story. So hopefully I'll be around to finish sharing it with y'all. This your man Truth, though, a.k.a. DJ for show. Jersey to VA all day. Holla at your motherfucking boy. One.
I be burning GP in that new GT, the Kufi Freeze. I bleed new Giddy, the weed 250 a half, it's the gas. My name Laz out in Brooklyn, I can rap, I be juxin', and I'm good looking. Hey yo, if you making music out there, make sure you promoting on my YouTube channel and my Instagram page. You heard my reels is on fire. Make sure you get at me. DM me at Real Saint Laz on Instagram or send me an email at thegenpopllc@gmail.com. That's a whole fact.